Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating, turbulent, and frankly astonishing history of the world's most recognizable landmark. Yep, we're talking about the Eiffel Tower. Now, when you picture Paris, you probably picture this elegant iron lady. But surprisingly, the Eiffel Tower actually had to fight tooth and nail for its very existence. It definitely wasn't always the beloved romantic symbol we know today. In fact, its story is packed with furious artists, brilliant engineering workarounds, international espionage, and a literal scheduled date with a wrecking ball. Let's get into it. To understand just how hated this thing was at first, you have to hear this 1887 petition. And this wasn't just some fringe opinion either. This was a formal protest published by a committee of 300, literally one member for every meter of the proposed tower's height. It included some of the most prominent writers, painters, and architects in France at the time, and they were absolutely horrified. They called it a useless and monstrous blot of ink that was going to crush the beauty of Paris. There's even a famous story about the writer Guy de Maupassant. He supposedly ate lunch in the tower's restaurant every single day after it was built, claiming it was the only place in the entire city where he didn't have to actually look at the thing. Section 1. A hated iron monstrosity. Now, you might be surprised to hear that while Gustave Eiffel's name is plastered on it, the original vision actually belonged to two senior engineers working at his company, Maurice Coquelin and Émile Nouguier. Back in 1884, they sketched out an idea for this massive metal pylon held together by lattice girders. At first, Eiffel wasn't even that enthusiastic. But once his head architect added some decorative arches and pavilions, Eiffel bought the patent rights and pitched it as a jaw-dropping temporary centerpiece for the 1889 World's Fair, which was celebrating the centennial of the French Revolution. And get this, the original design contest actually required that the tower be easily disassembled. Eiffel had the rights to the commercial income for 20 years to recoup his massive investment, but after that, the whole plan was to just tear it down and sell it for scrap in 1909. Section 2. Engineering the impossible. At the time, people genuinely believed a 300-meter tower would just sink right into the mud of the River Seine, or simply be blown over by a strong gust of wind. Yet the sheer speed of construction was mind-boggling. They went from a muddy foundation to a completed 300-meter tower in just over 2 years. And this wasn't some sloppy, rushed job. The drawing office pumped out over 5,000 highly detailed drawings. Every single part was pre-manufactured at a factory in a Parisian suburb, then brought to the site on horse-drawn carts. The position of the rivet holes was specified to within 1 single millimeter. I mean, if a piece didn't fit perfectly on site, they wouldn't just force it, it was sent all the way back to the factory. No drilling was allowed on site, period. That incredible precision was absolutely crucial because of this staggering number, 2.5 million. That is how many rivets were used to join 18,038 individual pieces of iron together. And despite the dizzying heights and having 300 employees working on site, Gustave Eiffel was a stickler for safety. He used movable gangways, screens, and guardrails, which meant that only one single worker died during the entire construction phase. For the 1880s, that kind of safety record was practically unheard of. Okay, to put this engineering genius into perspective, you have to understand Eiffel's background. He was an experienced bridge builder, right? So he knew his biggest enemy wasn't gravity. It was the wind. The structure contained 7,300 tons of wrought iron. But if you were to draw a giant imaginary box around the entire tower, the air inside that box would weigh 6,200 tons. The tower is literally mostly empty space. Its iconic, curving, exponential shape was specifically calculated to allow the wind to pass right through its lattice design while maintaining absolute structural harmony. It's brilliant. But actually getting those 4 massive angled legs to meet perfectly at the first level was incredibly tense. When Eiffel built these huge timber scaffolds to hold the legs up temporarily, the public completely panicked. Tabloid headlines were screaming that the tower was collapsing and that Gustave Eiffel had gone mad and been locked up in an asylum. But Eiffel was way ahead of them. To ensure absolute perfection, he had secretly installed 800-ton hydraulic jacks at the base of each leg. This let him millimeter by millimeter tilt and align the iron giants until they locked together flawlessly in March 1888. So we have this absolute marvel of engineering standing tall, but remember, the clock is ticking. As that 20-year concession neared its end, the city of Paris was fully prepared to dismantle the whole thing. So you gotta wonder, how does a doomed, temporary monstrosity manage to save itself from the scrap heap? Section 3. Saved by Science and War. Gustave Eiffel was a smart guy. He knew that to save his masterpiece, he had to make it completely indispensable to the French government so they wouldn't dare tear it down. Because of its immense height, it turned out to be the ultimate antenna. By 1910, it was transmitting time signals for the International Time Service. But its real salvation, that came with World War I. the tower's wireless telegraphy station became absolutely critical. In 1914, it jammed German radio communications, stalling their advance on Paris and actually helping the Allies win the First Battle of the Marne. And in 1917, it intercepted a coded message regarding Operative H-21, which directly led to the arrest and execution of the infamous spy Mata Hari. The tower quite literally helped defend France. And it wasn't just military strategy, it also pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. In 1910, a scientist named Father Theodor Wolff decided to measure radiant energy. He took readings at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower and then hauled his equipment all the way up to the top. To his absolute surprise, he found more energy at the top than at the bottom. Without even realizing it at the time, his little experiment on the Eiffel Tower was the very first incidental discovery of what we now call cosmic rays. Section 4. Secrets, Stunts, and Scams. Of course, a structure this massive naturally becomes a magnet for the absolute audacity of human behavior. In 1925, this brilliant con artist named Victor Lustig read a newspaper article about how expensive the tower was to maintain. So he forged government credentials, invited some scrap metal dealers to a secret meeting, and successfully sold the Eiffel Tower for scrap metal, collecting a massive bribe in the process. It's also drawn its fair share of daredevils. In 1912, tailor Franz Reichelt tragically fell to his death testing a wearable parachute. In 1926, pilot Leon Collett died trying to fly his plane right beneath the tower's arches. And fast forward to 1987, A.J. Hackett performed one of the world's first bungee jumps off the top and promptly got arrested the second his feet touched the ground. And speaking of secrets, while millions of regular visitors were busy climbing the stairs and taking those early hydraulic elevators to the public decks, Gustave Eiffel actually kept a little slice of the tower just for himself. Right at the very top, on the third floor, he built a private, secret apartment. He decorated it with plush furniture, patterned wallpaper, even a grand piano. He used it to conduct meteorological experiments and entertain absolute VIPs. In fact, in 1889, Thomas Edison visited and gifted Eiffel one of his brand new phonograph machines right up there in the clouds. Section 5. An enduring global icon. The tower survived literally everything, including World War II, where a German general famously refused Hitler's direct order to destroy it. It went on to become the defining silhouette of Paris, and looking back, we really cannot understate how far ahead of its time it was structurally. When it was built, it completely obliterated the height record held by the Washington Monument. The Eiffel Tower was the first structure in human history to break both the 200-meter and 300-meter marks. It stood as the tallest human-made structure in the entire world for 41 years, utterly dominating the architectural landscape until the Chrysler Building finally topped it over in New York City in 1930. But you know, surviving the centuries takes a lot of work. Puddle iron is incredibly strong, but it's highly vulnerable to rust. So, to keep the Iron Lady standing safely today, it requires a staggering 60 tons of paint to be applied entirely by hand every 7 years. Since it was constructed, the tower has been completely repainted at least 19 times, shifting colors from a reddish brown to a yellow brown, all the way to the custom Eiffel Tower brown you see today. And, fun fact, it's purposefully painted slightly lighter at the top just to perfectly complement the Parisian sky. Which brings us to a final thought to wrap up this explainer. We started by looking at how the brightest artistic minds of 1887 looked at the Eiffel Tower and saw only this hideous, tragic street lamp that was going to ruin their beautiful city. Today, it welcomes nearly 7 million paying visitors a year and is the ultimate global symbol of romance and French ingenuity. So, the big takeaway here is really a question about our own time. If the Eiffel Tower was so deeply despised when it was brand new, what daring, controversial structures being built today might just become the beloved global icons of tomorrow? It's definitely something to think about next time you see a weird new building going up in your city. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what you see.